I'm Satya Kaliki. I'm a co-founder and a VP of engineering. And what you're going to hear me say today is about a bunch of insights that we learned while we were building the world's largest product database. So Index is a company that is headquartered out of Seattle and with an engineering team at Chennai. We're about 60 people right now. We started in early January 2012. So next month will be 3 years. So a lot of people ask, how do you simply describe what Index does? And a lot of things, world's largest product database doesn't make sense for so many people. It can mean 100,000 things for everybody. So the best way to understand this is, everybody knows Facebook. Facebook made everything about people. And Google Maps, everything about places. And Index is about everything about things, products. So that's the simplest way to understand us. What do we do? This is our mission. Our mission is to organize, gather the information, analyze this information, visualize this information across the whole geography. Today we do it mostly United States, but eventually we'll do it in India as well as the rest of the other markets. So this information can be used by various sets of people. Now I'll give examples of who uses this information. So what we call is an infinite product intelligence is about having this, the center of this is actually the 500 plus million products that we have. These 500 plus million products are tracking across 40,000 brands. There are 400,000 sellers or retailers who sell these products across and spread across 6,000 categories. So we categorize these products. And about 10,000 attributes are available for these. So using this data at the center, we offer a lot of different intelligence to brands, retailers, independent developers. Ultimately, they're building apps using this data through our API, through this data. Okay. So we compute huge amount of insights. So definitely the vocabulary that we use to describe this is people can get offers intelligence, people can get catalog intelligence from us. What is offers intelligence is about getting anything to do with price based or anything to do with stock related, who's offering promotions at this point in time. Competitive advantage that you would have. And in a market which is very mature, and particularly the holiday season in the US that's going on right now, dynamic pricing. And people are interested in tracking prices almost on an hourly basis across products. So we supply information to people which they're interested in tracking. You know, though we have 500 million, but there could be a guy who's working at a retailer who's interested in tracking 25 products every hour. Are their prices changing by their competitors every hour? How is the stock status changing every hour? So they would like to find out. So we have the mechanics that's built in that can help people track this information, get alerts in real time, across so on and so forth. So there's a ton of different information that I can share about it. I'm not here to talk about the product or the actual features that are there, but I actually wanted to talk about the journey that we had over the last 3 years. And given that I represent engineering and I'm from a technology background, so you'll get a flavor of the engineering aspects of it. So what Ashish had given is a great business aspect of it. I'm going to talk slightly more tangential. Some of these may not apply to people who are one-people engineering teams today, but I'm sure over the years you have growth plans and you want to grow further your engineering teams. So you just file these information away or even reach out to me when you think you need some insight into, hey, I'm experiencing this problem. How did you guys solve it? So some of this could be today, you could use them, or you could use them in future. So first thing that we have, every company needs a culture. You heard Ashish say it. I'm sure a ton of other people who come in today are going to say culture is very important. It is essential. So we do have, at a company level culture, which is definitely around the principles you hear about honesty, about transparency, and some of these are very essential in the way people do businesses, right? Engineering-centric culture. So this is one of the differentiators why we think our engineering teams are pretty passionate about what we do and why we are able to retain them, why we're able to grow the talent, what we are able to accomplish in a short span of time. So we focused on the key aspect is how do teams react under stress in crisis. That's the first important step that we focus on. it's essential to know and observe how your teams are reacting to it. If you know them, if you watch them, how a team comes together, and great teams always have this DNA about they respond pretty well, and they respond, the actual unity shows up when you're in crisis. And that's exactly what we try to bake into our culture. So that's something that we keep remembering all the time. Every engineer that joins our team works for a brief period in what is called as a customer success team. It's very important. So we call this as walk a mile in the customer's shoes. So every engineer, before they write in a line of code, understand our architecture, understand our systems, the first thing that they do is work in the customer success, working in a proof of concept, or working and solving a particular business case or a use case for a customer. They spend enough time, understand it, spend like an analyst, do whatever it takes, learn the domain, but help the customer solve it. You have to have that stamp with you. You have to have the feeling that you might, at the end of it, lose the customer too. The customer says that, hey, I don't think your product fits my need. They might lose it, but there's a lesson that learned. So the engineer feels like I understood the use case that the customers are actually solving, the pain that the customer is experiencing, and how our platform is supposed to help them. So the engineer understands that. Doesn't matter where they're working on. They could be a JavaScript developer, but still they need to do this. When you're hiring hungry for excellence, it's easier said than done. A lot of people ask, how do I know what's actually hungry for excellence means? You look at what's important to the individual. Do they drive themselves pretty hard? Do they have a very high standard of quality? How they measure themselves in terms of their own success. What is that they have got? So it's the importance of observing that DNA and how do people measure themselves is essential for you to know when you're hiring them. And so we look at the basic hunger for excellence is an intricate part of a person, and that's what we look for. You could be even a little compromising on the technology. T-shaped people. Earlier on, we realized that hire people for both breadth as well as depth. It sounds a little bit cliche, but our experience taught is that if people are clearly understanding and they have some depth, they have some really good solid skills, and they also are susceptible and open to observing other things that are going around in the technology. It gives them a broader perspective of how they keep themselves informed and knowledgeable about other things. They might not be an expert on it, but they actually cover a fair ground. Do they actually spend time or not? In order to say this is, if it so happens that the individuals just focus on only depth and have no broad coverage, we ask them actually say, are they really interested? We want to make sure they develop that broader spectrum of skills, not necessarily at a depth. Technology choices, people worry too much. Engineering teams, I've observed a lot of engineering teams worrying too much about, I have to make the right technology choice, and they keep iterating, and they don't launch the product. They're not sure whether it's going to meet the need or not. Okay? You're not going to know the answer to it unless until you really, really take it out there and field test it. So stop worrying about technology choices being right. Make sure there are good design principles baked into your design, into architecture, so that you can take a component out and put another one if required. But if you say your database is not the best, fine, that's okay. You start with something that you're very, very familiar with. You can get it off the ground. But you may be able to replace that over a period of time if you think that doesn't scale well or doesn't meet. So in a short span of 3 years, we have rewritten 3 or 4 times some of the components because we scaled too fast, and we also didn't make the right choices at some time. So it's important to make sure we meet the need that is essential at the time. Right? So this happens when engineering teams start to grow. And what we realized is early days of the engineering teams, we establish certain principles and certain best practices, as you call them. They end up becoming sacred cows. People don't challenge them. People think that it's been there, so I should not challenge this. And probably people get offended if I challenge it. So first thing to do is break that myth. Break that myth. If you want a great culture, you want a team that grows, when you expand your engineering teams, you don't want your culture to dilute. First thing is to give the freedom and the confidence to the new people who join your team to challenge the status quo and say that, please, please, please question it. If you don't think it's right, challenge it. Okay? No matter who's the person who's decided that. It could be the co-founder who's written the original code. It doesn't matter. You have the right to challenge it. You must challenge it. So otherwise, you're just going to never learn continuously. You're not going to really make great strides. So you need to facilitate that culture. Right? Another principle that worked well for us, we call this the fail fast and iterate faster, is if it's going to fail, you might as well know it sooner. It's not about the number of lines of code that you write and commit every day into your repo. It's not about that. That's not the measure. That's not what makes you, it's actually how many features are actually being used, how much of this code is really, really working. Measure the code while it's in production. We're pedantic about knowing to the extent that we have baked in features that tell what a customer does in real time. A few seconds later, we know exactly what feature people are using. We track it. We track what feature is being used and what feature is used, what time of the day, where do people get maximum usage from our application. So it's important for us to know because there's a lot of things that we use that intelligence to design our systems better. We have things that ensure people get what they want. If somebody's starting their day with a bit of a coffee and they use our information, our reports to make their decisions, we need to make sure it happens every day. Otherwise, they're not going to start a great day. Measuring and monitoring is a great tool, and I'm sure all of you heard this said by many, many people. What's not measured never gets done, so it's important to make sure that you measure. So every component, you will see this in our teams all the way. It's whether it is the way we measure how people come to the stand-ups, right? So we had an issue related to people don't turn up at the stand-up regularly. People work 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late. So we gave everybody a superhero moniker. Like, I could be Batman or I could be, a Superman moniker. So it doesn't matter. So everybody in the team has got a superhero. So a superhero should never be late. If they are late, they're not going to save the world. So we used to track this on a big dashboard, on a big monitor that says, how many superheroes were on time? Just helped. Everybody didn't realize that, hey, I don't want to be late. So not to say that we're trying to be an organization that monitors. We are completely flexible in terms of time and what people do, but there are things that you need to be on time for. The stand-ups are a little, every team has to be there at the time because you're trying to make some important decisions, particularly early on in your, when you're in a very small engineering team. So measurement and monitoring is very essential. Every component has to have instrumentation. It has to give metrics out of the box before it goes to production. It's important to communicate what its status is. Every component should be measurable. It makes your life a lot easier if you thought about these things. And again, this is not something that you do if you're writing first line of code that you worry about, but if you're interested in scaling your systems, if you want to make sure your products are great, you need to think about it. So another principle that worked for us is what we call as a human fault tolerance. Human beings make mistakes, and you cannot stop them making it. So first thing is to design your systems that make it very, very hard for people to make a mistake. Whether it is a customer making a mistake, or whether an engineer making a mistake, or an operations guy making a mistake, find ways to design, bake it into your architecture that help build fault tolerance, which is human fault tolerance. A lot of people build systems fault tolerance, but not human fault tolerance. Think about human fault tolerance. Freestyle, a lot of companies do this. This is about every engineer has the opportunity to work on a new idea or a new challenge or a new thing that they want to experiment one day every 2 weeks. Google does this, Apple does this. A lot of other companies do it. So we call it, these days are freestyle days. Freestyle days are the days where an engineer has got the absolute freedom to do whatever idea they want to pursue. We got some amazing ideas, amazing features to our systems through these freestyle days. Okay. Some days, some freestyle days, we convert them into hackathons so that we had a great fun doing. We start on a Thursday evening and then go until Friday night and then have a bash and then go home and crash on Saturdays and Sundays. So freestyle days are amazingly useful, and that turned out to be one of the best things we did as a team. So these, as I said, don't think about these as if you're only a 2-people engineering team. I'm sure every day is a freestyle day for you, but eventually think about when you're trying to scale it and you have 20-people teams. Some of these principles will apply what helps you there. Bus factor. How many people actually heard about bus factor, truck factor? Not many? A couple of them. So it's an interesting metric. It's about how many people have to be run down by a bus before your engineering comes to a grinding halt. If you have only one person, and if that person gets hit by a bus, he's off for the next 6 months on a bed, you're going to get stopped, right? So you want to measure them, but you want to measure them in a very constructive way. You want to measure them in a way that it helps, right? So what we do is we have a ton of GitHub repos, right? So these GitHub repos, we make sure all people's names, all GitHub repos is a column, and we ask every engineer to go and say, every cell, say, okay, score a 0 or a 1 or a 2. If you have you're an expert on that code base, you put 2. If you know nothing about it, you put 0. If you know something about it, put 1. And you go look at every code base, how many people are there with the 2. You must have at least 2 people with the 2, some redundancy, right? More, the merrier. Now, we also tell every engineer that pick 2 or 3 code bases where you want to become from 0 to 1, where you want to become 1 to 2. And we ensure that through our sprint planning, we ensure that the engineers get the opportunity to work on stories that actually enables them to get from 0 to 1 to 1 to 2 over the next 3 to 6 months, right? Now what this helps is you get yourself redundancy in terms of as people can take worry-free vacations. This is from a stage where you want to sustain it. Now there's an intensity where the beginning, first 60 days, 90 days, maybe first 1 year is intense. Nobody's thinking about vacations, nothing like that. But you launched your product, you have the customers coming up, you want to maintain a production system 24/7, and you want to make sure your engineers are able to take time out, and sustainable business has to be built. So you want to make sure there are principles that are associated. Those are the times where some of these can come and help you, when you want to scale up your engineering teams particularly. Boy Scouts rule, again, we borrowed it from Boy Scouts guide. Nothing invented at Index, but simply leave the campground cleaner than you found it. This applies to the code. So all of engineers want to write code from a clean slate. I want to start fresh. I don't like the code that guy wrote. Okay. Now we heard this before, but that's not going to happen usually, right? So you have to make it part of the culture that you inherit the code irrespective of whether you wrote it, whether somebody else wrote it. You need to make sure that you leave it clean. You leave it modular. You leave it more maintainable. You need better code. You can lay out principles of what a good code looks like and give them examples to show it. But the onus is on you to make sure you leave the code cleaner than what you found it. It's again a metric that we track and we find ourselves. Pivots are natural. It's important. Every company goes through, like Ashish was talking about, there's a lot of moments, key decisions that get done during the course of a growth of a business. And don't worry if it feels like a pivot. So we started Index in 2012 with the focus of India, right? We started saying, hey, let's go crawl all the e-commerce stores in India, and then let's build this database. So of course, if we started there, we wouldn't probably be able to claim world's largest product database, maybe India's largest product database, but we realized quickly about 2-3 months later that the market is more mature for this business in the US. So we shifted that. We actually made an entire shift. So our founder and CEO, Sanjay, who relocated after 20 years at Microsoft, came back to India, settled in India with the entire family, actually relocated back because he just had to shift back home because clearly we decided to do a pivot and focused on US, and that's the best decision that we did. A lot of these things do happen during a journey of a business, of a product, of an engineering. So don't be afraid of it. Learn, act, keep listening, keep your eyes open, get the feedback, act on them. Make forward progress, right? Don't look at a stage where you want to be standing still. Okay, I think that's my last one. So I'm open to questions, information.
Thank you so much, Satya. I'm sure this is a house full of superheroes. Somebody will have a question. Can I have some questions for Satya?
You said that you measure the Boy Scout rule as well, like how they left the code cleaner, right? How do you measure that? What are the...
So there are metrics that look at, say, how many times there are requests that are made by the developer for other people to reviews on that code. So say, okay, GitHub allows you to some great features where you could actually make people ask you to review the code and stuff like that. So and we measure those, how many times people have interacted. So we also have what we call code katas, design katas, where people actually come and showcase the designs and the code stuff that they've done. So have you done any one of those on your code, on the code that you wrote? We have a fair amount of test metrics that look at how many times those tests have failed, or actually what's the coverage that we have available. Yet have anybody seen those metrics being improved from the time from the time I left that? So let's say a person took a code base and then for whatever reason has not been refactored quite well. So you know how modular or how less modular it was. And then you look at 6 months later when the person said, hey, I've actually done a fair amount of work, but I also built in some refactoring here. So you measure the same thing and you look at, say, have these metrics improved or not, right? So you would get a fair metrics that look at code styles, code design, how many code katas have been done on that. Okay. So all these are metrics that we can see on a dashboard and say, this guy has been responsible for this code base, and here's how he measured and improved it.
Thank you. Do we have any other question? Yes, we do.
So two things. One is in terms of every component has got an ownership. Okay, everybody signs up to some goals. Okay, so because the goals are broken into two. One is ownership in terms of features. So every feature has got a team. Okay, we have feature teams that take end to end from start to finish. They are responsible for it in production. Right. How did they complete that feature? In terms of including usability, including the feedback that we received, usage of the feedback, and use cases that it solves, okay? Just the typical code that people produce. Look at the quality rather than the time. So first importance is to actually give the quality of the code than get the time. Second is related to how many of their personal goals have they been able to meet themselves. Whether that is related to the bus factor improvement that they have got, or they said, hey, I want to learn how Scrum Masters do things, and I want to be a Scrum Master for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Have they been able to fulfill that wish that they had at the beginning when they started off with? Okay, because it's ultimately about if you let people set the goals that they want to, and then encourage them, facilitate them to meet those things. So what we have is coaches or mentors. Their responsibility is to not measure them, but actually facilitate them get those objectives. So if you define an objective that doesn't seem like the right thing for you, you're not even ready for it. The coach can actually tell you, you're not ready for it. You want to be a Scrum Master, but you don't want to be, you don't want to challenge people, or you don't want to be a little pushy on people. So which means that you need to work a little bit on your personality there. If you want to be, then yes, then you need to do it, because you want to make people do things for you as well. Okay, so do you have to develop a personality there? Yes. So help people pick goals that are in line with what they want, they have aspirations are, and actually facilitate them, track them through this thing. Ultimately make them successful as opposed to measure that they've failed. It's about measure them that they've succeeded and how you make them successful. So just look at it from a different perspective and do it regularly. And it's a small engineering team. It's not like we have a metrics-driven approach. Let's say it's like 4 out of 5. It's not about that's one thing which we say, don't rank people and say you're 4 out of 5. Actually, more than that, you say how many of your objectives are you able to make progress in terms of how your coach is helping you. And we encourage people to have more than one. So you may want to pick up time management and how you manage your time, how you manage your productivity improvement. There's a guy in our team who would be really good at that. So you learn from him. What tools does he use? How does he save his time? How does he get time to go have fun as well as be a great engineer? And how does he do this? So go learn from him. So we encourage people to have 3 or 4 mentors for different things, and then make sure that those interactions are happening and help them navigate through this. Code quality, of course, we do code reviews quite a bit. We have tools that we ensure. We tests are important for us. We start with tests definitely, and tests are the first thing. You can never run out of time for writing tests. You can run out of time for writing a feature because you use the time to write the tests, so that's good. Okay, and certainly we make sure that if it happens, the actual team lead responsible for it sits there, make sure that they understand it. So most importantly, show them what a good quality means, of code means.
So Satya, I have a question for you. We are a product startup, and the question is with respect to hiring.
Right.
So my basic question is, you told about a line where you have to see how hungry are they for excellence and stuff.
Right.
For me, the biggest challenge is to be able to attract talent for the fact that we understand we are a poor startup. they
Right.
don't have financial resources to be spending on a very talented person. So how do you overcome such a situation where you want the talent, where you need to attract the talent when you're building a core team especially?
Sure. I don't think my answer is going to be a silver bullet or anything secret here. It's about multiple things that one tries. Great thing that worked for us is references, right? So you know the person, you know somebody knows the person, you make the relationship, you use your network, okay? You may be small and you may not have a brand, but you do have a network, okay? You build your network, you make sure you tap into your network, you will find people who are like-minded, who are passionate about what you're doing. So ultimately, you need to find people whose journey is in the same direction as you're going. If you don't find that kind of similarity, you're not going to have them. We don't want to actually have people who are not traveling in the same direction. So you first have to find out that who are those people. Be in the forums where they are. If you think that yours is a place where you want to do, ours is big data analytics, then we make sure that we are in this right forums, right places where people talk about it, right? And look at people who are aspiring to do it. And then obviously you put all the things that one does in LinkedIn or any other sources that you want to put, you also do them. But ultimately what really, really worked for us in the first 20 people engineering that we brought in is entirely references based. Okay? And we take pride that we don't lose too many engineers, which is pretty good for us.
Well, thank you so much, Satya.
Thank you.
Pleasure. And can we have a round of applause for Satya?